Um, this class is called Rising from the Ashes. It's a 1 hour class, and we're really going to talk about how to get through things when life has broken down, um, and how to kind of manage through that, the emotions and the stress of really difficult situations. Um, and this isn't going to be about toxic positivity. This isn't going to be like, oh, let's just manifest your way out of this. Because you know what? You've got people in Gaza, and they're not going to be able to manifest their way out of war. There's a lot of chaos in this world, and we need to understand how do we function in a chaotic world when we don't have another option except for to be a part of the chaos, or where we are pulled into the chaos unintentionally, where nothing that we did inherently put us in a bad position except for someone else, someone else's actions, someone else's behaviors, um, things like that. So stick around and hang out for the class because it's a free class. And yeah, so we're going to kind of start um, with just kind of a little bit of a breath moment with the class. Um, and I kind of wanted to kind of talk about rising from the ashes. And every fire begins with a single strike, right? And we have this little strike here. And today we're remembering our spark and our strike. So whereas things in the world feel like they're a dumpster fire, they feel like they're on fire, we can't forget that we also have a spark, and we also have a fire within us that we can move and manage through these things, because we cannot always control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to it and how we move through it. So let's start the class with a quick grounding breath. And I just want you to deep breathe in, fill up your lungs, expand your rib cage, and exhale out through your mouth. And that's it. Really simple. So we're going to just deep breathe in and exhale out. And so I want you to think about, as I tell you this next story, and I will kind of start really just a quick disclaimer that I am a credentialed life coach. I'm a Reiki master, but I'm not a doctor, not a therapist. And we talk about some traumatic things in my classes, things that can be triggering and overwhelming to you. So if that's ever the case and you're overwhelmed, please feel free to step out of the class and understand that we do talk about some things that will be triggering during this class. And what will be particularly triggering, and something that I haven't talked about much, except for a brief moment where I kind of shared what was going on, is when my son got shot 2.5 years ago. And this was one of those catalyst moments, these life moments that changed everything in my reality, right? And so as I tell you this story, I want you to think about, what is your fire that is burning right now? What in your life is happening? What is going on that feels like an uncontrollable fire that you don't know how to get out of, that you don't know how to manage, that you have no choice but to face, um, while I tell you the story. So, um, back in March, I believe it was 2023, 2024. My brain is a little still scrambled from the trauma. Um, I got a random phone call, and it was about 10 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday. I remember this really distinctly. Um, and it was from my daughter, and she goes, "Oh my God, Shane was shot, and I don't know where he is. I don't know what's going on. Nobody knows if he's alive or not." And what had happened is that my son was out the night before with a friend at a gas station where he was shot. And nobody contacted his family. We weren't able to get contact. And I'll tell you the kind of the story of what happened in a minute. But his friend ended up walking like 10 miles home before he could call someone to tell everybody what was happening. And so my son was at a gas station with his friend. There was this man who was a known drug addict, a known criminal that had been released from prison recently. And he was picking a fight with my son's friend. My son stepped in between him and the friend. Um, and this guy pulled a gun and shot my son in the face. Um, he should not have survived. He was shot through the face. The Charlie Kirk situation was particularly re-traumatizing to us because Charlie Kirk was shot in a really similar fashion and area that my son was. And my son was shot where his jugular and carotid artery were completely dissected. It was actually in the right side of his face. There's pictures and the story you guys can scroll through um, my TikToks from a few years ago and kind of follow what happened. Um, and so, anyways, we get this phone call from his hysterical. Everybody's hysterical. His fiance is calling me, screaming. Nobody knows where he is. We start calling local hospitals, and we called every hospital in our area, and they're like, we don't have him. Now, I'm in a big city, so he wouldn't have been taken out of the city. We later found out because he was a gunshot victim that they actually change his identity when he goes in the hospital so that people can't find him, which I thought was really interesting. Um, but we finally got a phone call from a detective in the afternoon. Your son's been shot. He's in critical condition. He's in the ICU at this hospital, and we will help you get in contact with him later. Did not get in contact with him until like 6 p.m. that night, where they would only allow me, no one else in the hospital. So suddenly I was thrown into this situation where only I was allowed to be in this room with my son who was just critically injured. And he was in ICU, and I had no support. And I was his support in this situation. And for the next 28 days, I would be his support in this situation. Now, as someone who's worked with hundreds of thousands of clients, one of the things I tell them is like the most important thing you need to do is, as something chaotic is going on or traumatic going on, is that you're processing, you're not holding on to these emotions. Well, after this experience, I realized very quickly there was no processing of emotions. There was living in fight or flight in this ICU room for 28 days supporting my husband. I have not publicly spoken about what happened, but I will tell you that I fully believe the hospital was intentionally trying to pull the plug on him so they could harvest his organs. There were many behaviors that were very sketchy that happened during this. And I actually had my brother-in-law who worked for Department of Health look into it and investigate it because it was that scary. Um, Needless to say, I don't know if I'm still ready to speak out about the hospital. But what we're talking about today is when your world is burning down, when you have no choice but to just deal with what's coming at you, how do you manage this, right? Because you're in survival mode, right? So we think about like here in Arizona, recently there was a big flood and people had no warning. It just flooded and, several people were killed. We think about the church shooting that just happened. No warning, people were just there and it just happened, right? And there's these really dramatic situations that happen. And some of them are less dramatic, right? Like a sick child, a sick parent, a chronically ill family member, a partner who comes at you and is like, oh, suddenly they want to leave you or get divorced. And so this is these fires that burn brightly, they burn hotly. And I want you to talk about these. Think about your bonfire. What is burning right now, right? Because in the spiritual community, we have this toxic positivity where it's like, just meditate your way out of it, darling. You're not meditating hard enough. You're not manifesting right. You're doing your mantras wrong, love and light. And the thing that I realized through this experience, and as well as several others that happened after, is that most people, your people that you thought were your ride or dies, your support people, will not know how to support you through a lot of tragedy. And they will just peace out of your life, right? They'll be like, bye, not going to be able to help you. And the time when you need the support the most, you're going to be left with very little support, right? And so when we think about all of this and these fires that are burning, right? These dumpster fires, and people are like, yeah, just meditate. And you're like, my whole house is burning down. How am I going to meditate and maintain a good vibration during that? Here's the answer to that. You're not, right? If you're in chronic pain, pain is one of the lowest vibrational energies. The past year, I've been dealing with very severe chronic endometriosis pain, right? Does that make me low vibe because I am in pain? Technically, according to the vibration charts, yes, because pain is a low vibration, right? But it does not make you a low vibration person. There's a difference. You can sit in a low vibrational energy, and that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with you or that you're inherently bad or evil or not as good as someone else, right? When we avoid facing the pain head on, we avoid our healing, we avoid our understanding, we avoid the learning that we are meant to do as spiritual humans. We are here as spiritual humans to learn about being human. And being human, right, means experiencing all emotions, all experiences. Star says, as a shadow walker, gray worker, most of my healing has come from sitting in the depths of your pain. Exactly. If you, and I love that phrase, sitting in the depths of your pain. If you are not able to recognize your pain, sit in your pain, and understand your pain, you will repeat your pain. You will repeat the experiences because you did not learn what you needed to learn, right? The full processing of an emotion, the releasing of emotion and of experience happens when you complete the process, right? So like we talk about like sacred rage and sacred anger, you are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to say, I'm mad. You are allowed to be very, very mad. You're allowed to have that anger go, oh my gosh, I am mad, right? What you are not allowed to do is use your anger, your rage, your pain, and hurt others with it. What you should never do is make it a part of who you are. Make it a part of your personality. Make it change your humanness, your spiritualness. Make it erase your love, right? And that's what we're seeing in the world today with wars, with shootings, and all of these things, is that people have taken their anger and their rage and allowed it to erase the humanness of others, allowed it to erase forgiveness and processing and love, and allowed it to fuel that fire that is burning around them in a very negative way, right? We think about fire as this very masculine energy, and your fire can burn brightly in a very positive way. It could warm your food and your body. It could light your path, right? Anger is the fire that can light your path forward. You can use that anger to light a dark room, to bring forth understanding, to help you walk in the light. And so you can use that fire to be the light that you don't feel like you have. That whole love and light, your fire is your light, right? But I love this. Someone's saying here, you believe New Age spiritual practice bypass authentic vulnerability. Yes, and New Age spirituality is this. It is people who are moving from religions and looking for the same thing that they allowed in religion. Okay? They lack the spirit of discernment. They lack the spiritual knowledge. They lack intuition. They're just looking for another prepackaged way to connect to God, the universe, ancient holy masters, right? And so you're no better for leaving religion if you just replace it with the same stuff. And spirituality is just religion packaged in another way when it comes to that new age stuff, right? And there are so many of us when we have religious trauma, when we're leaving religions, where we seek something else, right? Because as spiritual humans, we need spirituality. We need connection to God, Creator, Mother Earth. We need connection to each other. We need community. And that's why people go to church, because they want the community and someone to tell them how to reach the God that was within them, right? To reach their spiritual humanness, right? Because they feel that they cannot reach that on their own, right? And here's the answer to this is that newsflash, you can. You don't need a religion, you don't need a building to reach God, to reach the universe, to reach Mother Earth, right? But utilizing your intuition, that inner knowing, is some of the hardest things that you can do because it's the easiest thing to do. It is so simple that our human brain goes, this is too easy. It can't be that easy. And it is, right? How easy is it to communicate with God? You just think, you just connect, you just feel in your heart. But as humans, we overthink, we overanalyze. We're like, I didn't read that in the book. No expert told me that. Nobody stood on a podium and told me how to do it. We have forgotten those connections. We have forgotten those intuitions. And so when we are hit with the storms and the fires and the dumpster fires and the chaos of this world, we forget our power, right? And we collapse into ourselves, right? So after my son was shot, I went into a stage of darkness. I've sat in that stage for about 2.5 years now because it affected me so profoundly. But it was not just him getting shot. It was my dad having open heart surgery after. It was me dealing with health issues. It was my mom who had been missing for 8 years, who we suddenly found her after having a stroke. It was my stepdad unaliving himself afterwards, right? And all throughout this, it was watching most of the people who I thought supported me and loved me and were my friends and cheerleaders fade away, right? And fall away. And so, in the darkest time when I needed the most support, I lacked it, right? We think about things like Gaza. We have empathy, we have compassion, we have secondary trauma from it. And yet we were very helpless to change anything, right? Incredibly helpless, constantly, and we're constantly secondary trauma by the news. We see things a city away, a state away, a country away, and we feel helpless. And the media is designed to elicit fear because that fear shuts off your ability to feel love. And love is where that intuition and knowing comes from, right? The stress shuts us down. It puts us in that low vibrational state, and then we're kept there without knowing how to escape, right? And so how do we excavate ourselves after the building is burned down and the fire has gone out, right? Rhiannon mentions talking to our higher self and our higher power and our spirit guides more than your friends talk to you. That's one of those things. I talk about walking prayer. I'm like driving down the road, praying, connecting to spirit, asking questions. Because here's the thing. Most people haven't gone through what you've gone through, But if you group together in your trauma, one of two things is going to happen. And it's usually the latter. Either one, everybody's going to support each other. We're going to rise out of the trauma and we're going to be okay. Or we're going to create a group of people who identify with trauma. I noticed this when I found out I had endometriosis and adenomyosis. I joined a bunch of Facebook groups. I was like, I need to connect with other people, see their experiences, understand what's going on, and really like go into my autistic hyper research phase of how to deal with this, right? How to deal with the pain, how to deal with this. And what I realized is that there was a group full of people who had made their illnesses their identities. And I understand why they do it, right? Because endometriosis, other illnesses, things like that, they suck ass. But it was like an all-consuming thing for a lot of them, right? And when we start to identify with our pain, if we start to identify with the trauma, it allows the embers and the fires to continue to burn, right? And when they continue to burn, your subconscious mind goes, I'm still in danger, right? And so I noticed that some of the most active people there were the ones that identified the most with their illness. And I always say, like, when we have an illness or an injury or something that's happening, we are not a victim. We are not, you know, the illness, but we are healing from that, right? So, like, I experienced domestic violence, but I am not a domestic violence victim. I am healing from domestic violence. I have endometriosis, but I am not an endometriosis warrior. I am healing from endometriosis and the emotions. So when we are in the chaos and the flames, we need to do whatever we can to support. This is an all hands on deck moment, right? When my son was in the hospital, everyone's like, you need to take breaks, you need to go eat, you need to go shower. And I was like, I'm not leaving his side. Barely left his side for like 28 days. Would never leave him alone. Good thing I did, because I'm literally serious. The hospital tried to kill him. He had a nurse that punched him in the face. But I kind of got towards the end where I was like, I need to take breaks, So the very first thing is that once the chaos is calmed down, is taking breaks. Are they micro breaks? Deep breaths. Even if you stop for 30 seconds and take a few deep breaths, just to realign your energy, right? I actually ended up taking a pillow and a blanket, and they had like a sanctuary, most hospitals do. And I went and kind of just slept on the floor of the sanctuary for an hour because I needed to get away from the beeping of the hospital and the noise and just have some peace, right? I took a break and went and nourished my body and fed my body. But we think about like the people of Gaza, they don't have the option to feed their body. They're dodging bombs and things like that. There is a book called The Man's Search for Meaning. It is about someone that experienced Auschwitz. Sorry, it may be incorrect on that, but I believe that experience. And he noticed that the difference between the people that survived and didn't was their mindset, right? And so the mindset in these experiences, and whether they're as dramatic as Gaza or as simple, as just a stressful day, is the unwillingness to give up, right? The unwillingness to succumb, the unwillingness to accept defeat, right? So, like with endometriosis, everyone's like, there's no cure but surgery. There's a cure for everything. I truly believe this. Just because it hasn't been found doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So what did I do? I found myself a cure. I don't know if it's a cure, but all my symptoms are gone. Will they come back? Maybe. I don't know. But I was like, I'm not willing to accept that answer. right? The people who are just surviving in Gaza right now are surviving because they are not willing to accept death. They are not willing to accept the erasure, right? And to do that, we build resilience, right? And resilience is the simplest and the hardest thing at once. It is when you get knocked down, when you collapse, willing to stand up again, right? It is willing to take one breath after the next until there is no breath left, right? And so, under the ash of the house that burned down, there are still the embers that glow. And it is finding those embers and using those tiny little embers to light your path to a new destiny, right? And when we light our path to that new destiny, we're able to find the new path that we can walk on, right? When we are unwilling to accept the answer that everyone gives us and take a new path, that's where we find success. I sat with my son for 28 days in the hospital because every doctor and nurse told me that his injuries were unsurvivable. And if you saw what happened to Charlie Kirk, you saw that it is unsurvivable typically. But my son survived. When they said they didn't have a treatment, I gave him homeopathics. He was intubated. I would put a little, you don't know what homeopathics are, you have to Google them, but I would take a little pellet of arnica, stick it under his tongue. I would make drops, little tiny drops, to put, he was intubated and I did that. I did energy work on him so much that it affected my body until I nearly collapsed. I actually did collapse once and ended up in the ER. I played healing meditation with sound vibrations in his room. I prayed over him. I asked ancestors to come in. In fact, there it is. This is the exact medicine bag I tied to the end of his hospital bed with a prayer in it, right? And so people told me that it was unsurvivable, but I did everything I could and refused to accept that answer. And he is alive today. I fully believe that it was prayers. Um, you know, because the doctors just kind of said there's nothing we can do. And there was even one point in the hospital where he was profusely bleeding to the point where he needed a transfusion. And I held my hand on that bleed for 45 minutes until I could get a doctor to come in, because I refused to allow that to happen. Now, I was lucky, and some people fight and they don't win the fight, right? They pass away, their illnesses, they succumb to their illnesses, right? Does that make them better or worse? Does that make me better or worse than them? No, it does not. Does that mean they didn't try enough? No, it does not, right? Some paths are just connected to destiny. Some parts are just our learning experiences. You know, ashes are messy. Life is messy. And life is built from the mess, right? And so we can't look at a situation and be like, well, they didn't try hard enough, because that's not true either, right? Of course not. It's not, right? But to rise out of the ashes, there has to be that spark that we can grasp. And no matter how hard it is and I had so many meltdowns. I'm like, I'm going to give up. This is too hard. That in the morning, we still are like, okay, I'm going to keep trying until there's no breath left. Right. And so that's really what it is. When we think about rising from the burn, rising from the ashes, it is the willingness to get up and try again. When you are dealing with this survival moment, and when you have this smoke and flame in your life, sometimes all you can do is just say, okay, this is happening. Now, what can I do? Right? And sometimes all you can do is breathe. And so you breathe, right? And sometimes there's actions you can take, right? And sometimes there's not. I somehow tend to be the person that always ends up um, at fatal car accidents before any of the EMS arrived. And once we came across an accident where this guy was fatally injured, but he was still alive when we got there. I won't go into the gruesome details, but he did end up passing. And he passed because he had a trailer on his car that landed on him. And I remember talking to my sister, who's a therapist, after, and I said, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I think about getting a jack out and lifting that trailer up? Why didn't I think about doing this, that, or the other? Why did I go directly to his mother and just comfort him while the men tried to work to help him?" And she goes, "Because you were not meant to do that. You were not meant to shift or affect that man's destiny." And so if you get stuck in these, could I have done things differently? Should I have done things differently while my world is burning down? The answer is, if you were meant to, you would have had an opportunity or a thought or an inspiration that directed you to. So I want you to kind of think about what feels like smoke and flame and fire and chaos in your life right now. And just kind of recognize and name that. Because I think one of the most important things is being able to recognize it. And I know that that sounds silly. How can how could you not recognize the pain, right? Right? How could you not? But for me, like with my son, everyone's like, "Oh, of course, the pain was him getting shot." But there was so much more to that. It was lessons of learning about being in control and being not in control in life, and learning that there are just things that are outside of my control, right? It was lessons in learning of when to give and when to receive. It was lessons. I actually had one of my awesome TikTok followers actually brought me lunch one day um, at the hospital because I was out of money and hadn't eaten in like 2 days. And they were so kind. They brought me the best curry in the world. And that was the hardest thing in the world to do, was to receive that gift, right? It was so hard. And so sometimes naming the chaos and the flame and turning that pain into power is other lessons, other experiences beyond, you know. It was a moment in releasing as a healer of understanding that I am not meant to heal or fix everything, right? And so sometimes the situation is too chaotic to look at it at that moment, and you may not be able to reflect until later, right? Um, but there's so much that we can learn and grow and understand, right? So when you think about what's on fire in your life, naming that pain, naming that power. Sorry, my laptop's misbehaving here. Naming that pain and naming that power gives you, sorry, let me reverse this. Naming your pain gives you power, right? It breaks the denial, it ends the toxic positivity, it ends the guilt, blame, shame trance, right? Um, it helps you release the shame, it helps you release the, oh, just be grateful you survived, or the spiritual bypassing stuff. So, what I want to do in the rest, trusting and allowing the universe will have your back, and you don't need to do it alone. Exactly. Right? We are here for a very short amount of time. We are all born to eventually die. This is a temporary existence. Our bodies cannot and do not last forever. Right? And there are only things in these human bodies that we can learn as a human. Right? And so, as a human, we can experience these ranges of things that typically do not affect us as eternal spiritual beings, right? The pain, the injuries, the illnesses, right? Um, and they can be very beautiful and powerful experiences, not only for us, but for others, right? And as we move through, you know, we have that ember, right? The ember that is lighting the path. And that ember is the values, the skills, thank you, Barbie, the inner truth that survived the fire. Because after the fire calms down, that ember is what's left. The experience is what's left. And so we decide what that experience becomes to us, right? So the experience with my son could have become anger and rage. And it is still somewhat traumatic, of course, but it could have become a negative experience. But I have made efforts to make it a positive experience. It's been an experience in forgiveness. I still haven't totally forgiven all the hospital staff for what they did. I need to work on that. I was able to forgive my son's shooter, um, and I was able to see him from the eyes of a compassionate mother of, he must have had a really horrible life to end up where he was, right? And I wrote a whole letter for his sentencing, talking about that compassion, you know? Um, I learned the importance of self-care. I learned that I was not invincible, that I couldn't go without taking care of myself, that there had to be self-preservation even in chaos, right? Oh, I didn't know your son was shot. Barbie in the comments says she's walked through a similar path. Her son was shot in the head and survived. And I'm so glad that he survived. And it's a terrible experience to watch your child be injured, right? So when you're thinking about what feels smoke and flame in your life, it helps you to recognize what's going on, what you've experienced, but it also allows you to grasp on the ember of what's still glowing, right? Where's your spark? Where are your talents, the new relationships, the values, the instincts, right? Um, so think about where on your path this is taking you, right? Um, my son had multiple strokes after he was shot, and I learned about caring for someone with strokes. So when my mom was found, she'd been missing for 8 years. We got a phone call, "Hey, we found your mom in a hospital. She'd had a stroke." I knew how to take care of her. I knew what rehabs to take her to, you know? Um, I knew how to manage her. I knew how to care for her, how to walk in a wheelchair. So an experience that was awful gave me great benefit, right? Um, when the chaos has calmed down is the moment where you think about rising like a phoenix from the ashes, right? Where you start to shift towards, how do I rebuild from the ashes, right? Um, how do you rebuild from the chaos? Because Our nervous systems dictate our physical and emotional health. And I didn't realize how much this impacted our bodies until the last 2.5 years. I was like, holy shit, I can barely function, right? And I thought after my son was shot, I was like, surely this is the worst life experience. God, creator of the universe, not going to send anything more. Then my other son got in a minor car accident. Then my dad had open heart surgery. Then I had a health crisis. Then we found my mom. Then my stepdad unalived himself. Then we moved. And the list goes on and on. And I realized that life doesn't stop moving, the chaos doesn't stop coming. We just have to learn how to manage through it. And so I learned how to say, I need a break. I learned how to say, I'll be happy to help you, but I'm going to take care of myself first. I'm going to take my vitamins. I'm going to go, you know, do my breath work. I'm going to go brush my teeth. My God, when my son was in the hospital, I didn't think I brushed my teeth for like the first week because I just forgot, right? Hello, Annie. And so, when you think about rising, the very first thing that needs to happen is nervous system regulation. This happens through daily grounding, movement, breath work. Um, for me, swimming and working with water, and I don't, and maybe I'm just clueless and naive, but I don't hear a lot of people talk about how healing water is. Um, my husband was very like, you should go swimming, you should go swimming. And I was like, swimming, that's dumb, right? Like, that's what you do for fun, right? Um, I started this daily swimming practice, which I recently had to end because it got too cold to swim anymore. But it became this meditative practice for me, this peace and this quiet where I would just sink under the water and communicate with the water and meditate and hear spirit speaking to me and giving me messages. And I realized that it was calming to me. My blood pressure got better. My all of my health metrics got dramatically better. I noticed even if I sat at the edge of the pool with a cup of coffee for 20 minutes every morning, that the joint pain seemed to be washed away from my body. So I am huge on using water as a nervous system regulation tool. I know that not everyone has access to bodies of water or to swimming pools, but if you can incorporate water healing, even if it is standing in the shower and meditating, or filling your bathtub with flower petals and crystals, whatever that is to connect with water, it can be a really, really healing process, right? Um, Water is incredibly healing, right? So, and I think that the healing is different for everyone, right? Um, and so some people may like, I don't connect to water. Some people might be like, I really connect to animals. Okay. So here's something really interesting I see with people. A lot of people who had significant trauma go into animal rescue. Why? Because it's something they can easily manage and control. Not everybody, a lot of people though, right? They're like, I can't save myself. I can't save this other person. I can save the animals, right? Be really careful falling into that. I can't control my life, so I'll control something or someone else trap. But animal therapy, equine therapy, my mom and my son, they brought in therapy dogs at the hospital. Fantastic, right? People go hiking, they go out. Um, every reaction after a trauma is the body's attempt to regulate a nervous system. Even if it's things like drugs and alcohol, it is the subconscious going, I need to heal and I need to balance and I need to stop this chaos that's going on. So if you can find something that you can be in control of that releases your emotions in a healthy way, do it. Walking, running, pickleball, I don't care what it is. Whatever works for you. right? As long as you're not causing harm to yourself or others, go for it. Find your stability, find your rock, okay? When chaos hits, if you don't have a firm foundation, if you don't have a rock, whether that's spiritual practices or religion or family or whatever that is, getting through those things are going to be harder. Okay. So if you don't have a foundation, start building it. If you're on the other side of the chaos, you can still build it now, right? Your foundation, the more layers it has, the stronger it's going to be able to support you, right? And just because I have religious trauma doesn't mean religion won't be right for you, right? And maybe it's not right for you. Doesn't matter. Whatever is right for you. Build yourself a foundation, not just one thing, multiple things. Because if you have this really firm foundation, when everything in life starts to hit you, you're going to be able to stand through that, right? If your foundation runs deep and strong, you're going to withstand all of the chaos that life is going to throw at you. One of the reasons why I felt so necessary to teach this class, and I have restrained from speaking, and somewhat spirit has restrained me from speaking for quite some time about my visions and my dreams of the future, because I didn't want to scare people. I didn't want to frighten people. I didn't want to harm people. And I realized that it's time to start speaking about these things because the chaos in the world is only going to continue. You're going to see things ramp up, natural disasters, shooting, weather things, earthquakes, all of this stuff is going to ramp up. And if you're not building your foundation, if you're not working on your nervous system now, when that chaos happens, you're going to fall and you're going to fall hard and it's going to be really hard to get back up again, right? Build your resilience now. Build your spiritual practices and your routines now. So, not if, but when things happen and when life starts to throw things at you, you will be able to rise out of the fire and the embers and the ashes. When my son was in the hospital, it was super hard, but what did I do? I had a yoga mat. I did yoga stretches every day. I sat on the floor in the ICU and meditated. I prayed over him, over myself, over the nurses. You know, maybe my practice is more as good as they should have been, or maybe it was just because I was just pushing myself to the complete breaking point. But I feel like I had something, you know, a little foundation. I had one or two friends that stuck around through the whole thing and they would support me. But like through the whole thing, even my social media followers were like, peace out. You're not that fun person anymore, right? I'm not the perky person anymore because the trauma changes you. Think about it this way, those of you that are parents will understand after you have a baby, you lose most of your friends because the ones that don't have babies don't understand you anymore. We are meant to shift and grow through life. We are not meant to be stagnant. We are not meant to have an easy life. We are meant to grow and change and understand. If your life is all easy, if it is not changing, if you are not changing, you're doing something wrong. If you don't have moments of chaos where it feels hard to breathe, you're not human. There's nothing wrong with you because something bad happens to you, right? People in Gaza aren't bad people because they're experiencing what they're experiencing. The people that were shot in the church yesterday, they're not bad people because they were there, right? It was part of their journey. It was part of their experience. And then there's just the fact that there are some people that cannot move through their own emotions and traumas, that have agency and use that agency to cause harm, right? And we have no control over that. We cannot control. I couldn't control that someone who used their agency to shoot my son shot my son, right? We can only control what we can control, right? We cannot control that our government is out of control and is complicit in genocide. We can't control that. But there are things that we can control. Like I had a client who was independently wealthy. She took a plane to Gaza. I think it was last year, the year before last. I can't remember the date. Don't quote me on it. Flew out there and flew out a bunch of orphan kids out of there, saved them. She couldn't stop what was happening, but she could do something to change it, right? And sometimes all we have is our voices, our intuition, right? Sometimes we rise from nothing. Sometimes we carry a few things with us. But the most important thing you can do is when you think about the world burning around you, is understanding who you are, what you stand for, what is your foundation. So when those things hit, it will be second nature to know what to do, how to manage it, and how to heal after. So maybe this class in part is to encourage you to build your foundation, build your intuition. I have free classes all over my YouTube, guys. So many free classes, intuition building, healing classes. So few people take advantage of those, you know? Take advantage of them, build your foundation, understand that your power is within you. It is not within anyone else. And they can't take your power away unless you willingly give it, right? When my son was shot, I could have let that disempower me, but I didn't. I let it empower me, and I took back my power any place and I could, right? Doctors and nurses told me I couldn't. No, that's not the way this works, right? I will be an advocate. I will stand up for what is right, you know? And when you know who you are and what you stand for and what that foundation is, you'll be able to move through anything, you know? And so I don't know where I'm ending this class because I want you all to be fireproof from the flames of the world. But I know in my heart sometimes some things are so hard, it's hard to be fireproof. But I also know when you have a firm, strong foundation and know who you are, when you are able to connect with your intuition and your higher self, and there's classes on that on my YouTube, that you can become more fireproof, that you can walk through the flames of this world and you can walk back in carrying your own embers and your own fire. That if you learn how to heal and balance your nervous system, you can move through those things a little bit easier and a little bit more powerful. And you can help others rise too. A lot of healers have been going through hell the past 2 years, 3 years. And I believe if you identify with an empath or a healer, this is for you, is that we are having to walk through our fire right now to learn how to manage it so that when the world gets even more chaotic, we will be able to help others walk through their fire too. And so if you identify with an empath or a healer, now is your time to build your foundation, to heal your nervous system. We have 6 or 8 months before things are going to start getting really wonky. I mean, it doesn't mean that things won't happen before that, but expect things to ramp up. Expect things to be more chaotic, right? And it says, I haven't seen you in a long time. I hope I'm doing well. I am healing. Like I said, I went through some of the hardest experiences of my life recently, and I am still working through those things. Hey, Jennifer. And I will say, you know, I am an imperfect person. I often teach from a space of hypocrisy. And I think that's why the universe threw me into the chaos so that I could face my own healing, because for years it was so easy to do just hundreds of thousands of medical intuitive readings and stuff for all of you out there in internet social media land. And it was so easy to avoid my own healing. Um, and I've always kind of recognized this, but more powerfully so recently, that each one of you was reflecting what I needed to heal within me. I had a really powerful, I'm going to end with a really powerful experience I had with one of my clients last week. So he came in. I actually have very few male clients because it's usually just feminine energy clients. And feminine energy doesn't mean like they're inherently like feminine. It's just gentle energy men. Um, but he came in and he was like, can you ask spirit like why my life is so chaotic, why things are so hard, why I constantly am hit with things? And spirit kind of came back with something that took me aback, but it helped me understand myself too. Is that spirit was like, oh yeah, he's meant to have chaos throughout his life. And I was like, what? And spirit's like, yeah, chaos is meant to follow him, but he is meant to learn how to manage chaos, and that is why there's so much chaos in his life. Needs to learn how to not collapse in the fire, how to not collapse in the chaos, so that he can walk through and lead others through the chaos. And it was at that moment where I realized that my client and myself had been specifically designed to manage chaos. And so being hit with a really hard astrological placements, the chaos in life, the constant trauma. And I mean, like when people hear my life stories, they're like, oh God, girl, how are you still alive? Because it started from when I was little, right? And I realized that all of the chaos wasn't there to hurt me or punish me. It was there to help me learn how to rise up in the chaos so that I could walk through it with others, right? So you think about like a firefighter who is walking through the fires and the flames carrying someone. There are those of us who are specifically designed to be that person, right? To maintain calm through chaos, to learn how to protect ourselves and others and show them the path and be the ember through the darkness that is coming. And so if you feel like your life is particularly chaotic, particularly difficult, that you've had more than your fair share of horrible life situations, it is not because there is something wrong with you. It is not because you are being punished. It is because you are strong enough to walk through that. And not only walk through it for yourself, but walk through it with others. That you are not only meant to heal yourself, but lead others through the chaos. And this specific client, I get a lot of visions and really interesting spiritual downloads and channelings as I work with my clients. And I was given this vision of a king, a very, just gallant king on a horse and like flames and fire, and he's leading people through battle. And I realized that the only way that someone would know how to lead someone else through a battle is by understanding what it's like to walk through that war zone themselves, right? We don't learn through theory, we learn through experience. And so you can actually look, like my son, when he was shot, he told his friend, put pressure on my neck, hold it here, hold it hard. His life experience before that was in Boy Scouts, getting first aid. He knew what to do. And because he knew how to walk through chaos, was able to tell his friend to hold pressure on his neck. His friend was panicking. He'd never dealt with chaos, didn't know how to deal with it and manage it. His friend, instead of facing and learning chaos, had always kind of gone to alcohol and drugs, right? So he didn't know how to manage the chaos. He just numbed it. But my son knew what to do and he told him what to do. That's what I'm talking about here. That's what I'm talking about. So when you sit there and you think, my life's been a shit show, this isn't fair, God must hate me. No. If you've been through hell and back more than once, more than twice, more than 20 times, it's likely because you are so incredibly strong. And I actually had a client soul say this. I chose my path because I knew I was strong enough to walk it. And very few people are strong enough to walk that path. So understand your inherent strength. Understand that you carry the ember, the spark of greatness and God within, and that you are strong enough to handle and walk through the path. And don't let anyone gaslight you. Don't let anyone say, love and light, love and light. You're not high vibe. Some of the most high vibrational beings are the ones who can exist in some of the most low vibrational states. I come from a Christian background. If you don't, just take this for what it's worth. You think about, though, Christ and the story of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was said to bleed from every pore, feeling the pain of every person who'd ever existed on this earth. Christ even was said to exist in the lowest vibrational state that a human could exist in. Take that for what it's worth. But just remember, whether you're Christian, whether you're not, he did say one powerful thing: of these things I do, you can do and more. He was not here teaching us to follow him, but to be like him, to walk on water, to heal the sick, to raise the dead. And we all missed it. Most of us. All right, everyone, that concludes our class. Rising from the ashes, turning breakdown into breakthrough. If you signed up for the class through my website, you will be getting a link for replay. If not, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube so you get a notification when the replay is uploaded. Yes, any baptism through fire. I hope all of you are doing well. I always say, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll try to be on live more. I likely won't be on live as much. It's painful for me to sit anymore. And it's hard for me to do lives. It's hard for me to do sessions and things like that. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what and where Spirit Fluent is going, but I have a path and direction where we're going to talk about spiritual shit and the secrets of the universe. If you want to be a part of that, make sure you go to my website, get on the wait list, send me emails, send me messages, tell me what you guys need, what you want to see from me, because I am my strongest and most powerful when people ask me to support them, when they tell me what they need, because otherwise I get lost in my own chaos and I'm like, I can do all these things, I don't know what to do, right? Oh, whoops, hold on. TikTok wants me to do a puzzle. That's always fun. But yeah, thank you guys. And yeah, like I said, I'm not sure where we're going, but I know that I'm getting there. It was interesting. My mom was visiting me for the past 2 weeks, and a couple days ago, she goes, something changed in you. I can feel your fires back. And I'm like, I feel it too. And I was driving around my neighborhood blasting Tupac, and I was like, yes, it's back. I don't know where I'm going, but it's back. We'll figure it out, maybe together. So I hope everybody has a beautiful and wonderful day. I will look forward, hopefully, to seeing you guys in future classes. We do have another upcoming class. This is more focused on relation stuff, but it's about when love makes you sick. And it's really talking about how toxic relationships can damage your health. So go sign up for those. A lot of my classes are free of charge or donation based. I will be adding more classes. If you have an idea for a class, you know, email me, message me, be like, hey, will you teach a class on this? Will you do a video on this? Tag me in comments. I need that. Like, if you guys are like, how do I support? How do I, like, guys, like, I can literally channel any answer from the freaking universe you want. Ask me questions because I want to help. Okay. Um, so there we are. Love you all. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for your love and support, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys again. Bye.